Welcome, everybody. It is January. It's 2025. It is a new year. It is a new opportunity to talk about CAR-PGA. It is a new chance to do the virtual sessions that we've been doing, uh, which I'm very excited to continue. I am excited to talk to our guests, but I wanted to do a couple of housekeeping. And I have some exciting things because I was just confirming with Adam, who we're going to talk to in a minute, that I didn't believe my eyes. So we have a record number of four new members joining, and they all seem real because we get a lot of members that are not real. They're spam or whatever. So they apply to the tool. We have a tool online. These are real people, and near as I can tell, just because they it looks like they use real emails. So we're going to welcome James Fielder, Joseph Lockett, Lauren Small, and Anthony Kurza. So very exciting. That's four in a month. I'm pretty sure Blue Sky is part of this. I can't absolutely prove it. But we've had a lot of traction engaging there, and I'm pretty visible there. So, welcome to all of our new members. That's fantastic. I have to have to put your names in and make sure you're on our newsletter list as well. So that's exciting because it's you who are current members know part of our annual report is to get at least one member a month. And we've just blown Q1 out of the park. So I'm quite excited about that. And I will take it. That was pretty exciting. So good for us. Fantastic. And we are making great progress. So that's one thing. The other thing, of course, speaking of progress, is we're about our ongoing quest to recycle our board membership. So, for those of you who do not recall, our board membership is up for review. We basically start in January to put themselves forward, and then there's a vote. There are five slots total, and I think we have more than that, which is very exciting. I think I failed to introduce myself. My name is Mike Tresca. I am committee chair of the board currently. So I'm excited about the opportunity to any kind of turnover is good. It's healthy. And what is equally as important as people volunteering for the board, and by the way, the board lift is pretty light. So it's once a quarter we're going to meet. And we ask people to just attend two of those for the year, realizing that times don't work for everybody. And and we meet to really talk about our goals and our progress and make sure we are engaging. And then hopefully expanding and expanding the breadth and depth of the CAR-PGA and how it engages with the community. But the really big thing is voting. Um, I always say the health of an organization is determined by how people vote. And by that I mean I don't even mean if you vote one way or the other, you pick people. And what we'll do is we'll do cumulative. You sort of check all the people that you're interested in voting for. So obviously, if there is more than the number of slots, you can only pick a certain number, which is great. That actually means that there's sort of it's not just a done deal and we just ratify those people. Um, but voting at all is important. We have had years where nobody voted, and that's not great, right? Because that means the membership's not reading the newsletter and looking at things. But and we realize everyone's busy. So what's going to happen is you're going to get the newsletter February 1st. Dave Millions will send that. He is very good at that. And to the membership, including our new members. And then we will have another voting tool. We'll have a tool, which we have a tool online for applying to join. We'll also have a tool online to essentially vote for those members. And we will tally the votes. Actually, David will. David is up for membership, as am I. Basically, I think most of the board members have reapplied, not everybody. And the committee chair, my role is determined by the board. So in other words, it's not like we vote for the committee chair. It's the board does that, and then we figure it out. So there's no guarantee that I would be committee chair going forward, and that's absolutely intended. I've been committee chair for several years, and but we'll see how that shakes out and how membership. So first of all, you have to be a board member to get there, and then we'll figure it out from there. So my ask of you, first of all, when you see this, is vote. Second of all, is to absolutely support and engage with all our members, especially welcome our new members. We will share that info as well in the newsletter. So very excited about all this. This is quite the new year coming in strong, which is fantastic, and hoping to keep that momentum going. Faith and I have actually discussed, Faith has joined, that we were talking about trying to do panels where we have a true panel where we have actually multiple members discuss things. I'm hoping we can get our act together and set that format up going forward, but it takes a little bit more coordination, so we're still working on that as well. Okay, that's a lot of talking for me. So I'm pleased to introduce our guest. Adam, I didn't actually even ask how to say your name, but I'm pretty sure I know how to say it, which is Adam Watson. Did I say that right? All right.
A
I
thousand
did it right.
percent. Yes, you're
Okay.
good to go. Thank you.
In my day job, I used to do new hire orientation, and new hire orientation in a global company is a terrifying exercise in getting everyone's name wrong 80% of the time. And then they sort of would judge me on how badly I did. So it's quite the experience to go through something like that. But it certainly got me over the fear of doing it. After a while, you're like, you know what? I get it wrong, and please forgive me. I apologize. But I should normally check, and I didn't check because we had some technical issues beforehand. So welcome, Adam. I'm excited to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm so thankful and pleased and humbled to be asked to join as a guest of your show.
It was so funny because Adam, when we contacted you, you're like, I know you already. I was like, oh God, did I actually have him on the show? No, I was like, okay, no. He was in
No.
where you were in our LinkedIn group or Facebook, which was the
I think,
connection?
eventually all of them, really. I think the only thing I hadn't
Yeah.
done was gone through the form that you have on your website and actually apply to be official.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I was subscribed to YouTube and following you on LinkedIn and
True
so those
fan.
places, yes, I was
True
trying to
fan.
be. It's a wealth of
Yes.
resources. Your newsletter has been really great on that, by the way. So anyway,
Thank
yes,
you.
that.
And I don't, it's not just me. Obviously, it's a
Oh
team
yeah.
effort. But
Mhm.
yes, and that is a good reminder for those of you who are also watching. Technically, membership is that form. Like all the other things is the feeder into that membership, but we don't always push that point. But we fixed it. I actually see your name in there, and I know that you are in this. So, Adam, if you've seen any of these before, because you've seen me post on LinkedIn group and our Facebook page, and we also post them in the Google group as well, which I don't know if anybody even uses Google groups. We do still.
Mhm.
Is really what we try to do is take folks through a little bit of their background. I used to think this was super unique, and then it turns the Dragon podcast, which my friend Shelly, she's been doing forever. They do the exact same thing, so it's not anything revolutionary, but it is a
Mhm.
nice bridge to start from. How you sort of got interested in gaming, um, and sort of how that sort of brought you forward. So if you'd like to tell us your gaming background, I think it's a good place to start.
I would love that. Well, first off, I always like to start in those conversations that Dungeons and Dragons and I are very almost linked literally a hip because we're almost the same age. The canonical, I think, is that January 1974 is when D&D first came out into the world, and February 1974 is when I first came out into the world. So right from the start, it was like destiny and fate.
Love that.
But my personal story and intersection was several years later. I was probably, I'm going to go with about 10 years old. So I was in the height of the 1980s golden era of tabletop role-playing games. And a family member had was a fan, a little bit ahead, older fan member, and it was like this family member was like, "Hey, there's this game. I know you like science fiction stuff," and I did. I still do. And so the first tabletop role playing game I actually played was Star Frontiers, TSR Star Frontiers from the mid
Mm-hmm.
80s. And I fell in love. It was the all the things, and I'm sure they're tropes or cliches at this point for any other guest that's ever been on. But I will say all the ideas about, it's your imagination and the co-created story aspect of it. The thrill of rolling the dice and seeing which way it was going to fall. Was your laser blast going to make it? Were you going to leap the chasm? All those things was wonderful. And this, of course, although it's certainly having a resurgence and renaissance today, I would say that this is also in a time of, and as opposed to what, right? Like Atari was the height of video games at the time, right?
Yeah.
So it was the cinematic experience, the Star Wars and the Indiana Jones and the Star Treks and all of those things. But it was more primitive times in the world of 8-bit. 8-bit would have been exciting back then, probably. Anyway, um, loved it. And, as many do and many have, it just started my quest for more. I have bought and owned more tabletop role-playing games than I've ever played, and I love the collection of that, the reading and the rule books and so on. But from Star Frontiers. There was a little dabble of Dungeons and Dragons and um, also some of those golden 80 times. Steve Jackson games, loved me some Car Wars. That was so fun. Um, the FASA
We
Star
had Steve
Trek.
Jackson on here. I don't know
I
if you knew
know, I
that. Yeah,
know, I
yeah.
know. I love
He
some of
was he
the,
was he put me through my Steve is tough. I love him. He knows that. But it was pretty funny because he was like, "What are you going to ask me? Go ahead." But anyway,
yeah, just dare to surprise me
yeah,
after all
yeah,
these years, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
So, definitely the West End Games, the first edition of Star Wars. That
Oh
was
yeah.
that was exciting times. But there was probably a good 3 or 4 years, maybe actually the Star Wars West End Games, the Ghostbuster West End game was kind of near the end of a run there, where I had bought a lot, played as much as I could, and then I'm starting to go into, the heights of middle to high school. And, again, a very typical story. I got busy with stuff, it was harder to find the idea of finding a group. So hard. It's always hard. But that was a period of time where finding players just kind of fell to the wayside. However, I will say, and to this day, I kept all these role-playing games in various stages, eventually a bin, and that bin has survived all the 4 centuries or four decades since. Almost said 4 centuries. That would be long.
Oh, are you a
I'm an
vampire?
immortal
What's happening?
vampire.
Okay.
Yes, it's all come out now. But yeah, it's like even it's those old, mid '80s games. Many of those box sets and such, and I still have them. Um, and that always kept in the back of my mind, even as I went into education, which is kind of another answer to maybe another form of a question. But definitely, as far
Yes.
as the tabletop role playing games, that's where my history comes. So it's back from the golden '80s.
I love that. So, yeah, I mean, you hinted at it. So, bridge us to education. So, as you probably know, we have a lot of educators here. I always try to summarize the CAR-PGA, and we used to say we were researchers, right? But there's a lot more than that. We have a lot of folks who are in the game industry, faith being the example. We have a lot of folks who are um, educators for sure. We have a lot of therapists who work in the space, and we have a lot of business owners as well who come at it from that perspective. So, I'm curious, sort of the education piece and that bridge for you, how did that sort of happen?
Well, I actually came to education a bit late in the sense that I always wanted to be a teacher, but took some side roads and then had to work full time. So college was part time. So I was a little past 30 when I actually became a classroom teacher. But at that point, it was always in the back of my mind that there was, something there, something about game-based learning in general for sure, but also tabletop role-playing games like, can we do something with it? In my own classroom experience, I was a classroom teacher, high school English mainly, for about 9 years. And in that 9 year stretch, I did some, I would call dabbling, Probably one example, and I'll be super brief, is it started with a packet, and then I kind of tabletop role play gamed it up a little bit in the sense that there was this idea about a simulation for starting out Lord of the Flies, which is students are on a desert island with minimum stuff. How do they survive? What do they do? That kind of thing. Well, I took that germ and tried to make it more immersive, So what I did was on a certain day, I think it was my sophomores, as students were walking in, I had the sound of an airport, like an MP3 of that just kind of looping and playing. And I was handing kids tickets, their airplane seats. And they noticed the student, the desks were all arranged differently and weird. Yes, find your seat. There's the map on the screen. They did. They're all like, what's going on? When we're done, I sealed the cockpit door. That is, I closed the door. I went up, I hit another button, and now it's a recording of me as the pilot talking from the cockpit, but I'm in flight attendant mode, and
Wow.
things are going fine and normal, and everything seems to be glorious, and the pilot seems a little bit worried, and then there's an alarm, and then lights go black, the side goes black, and we've crashed. Um, and it's, some of it was just probably clever cosmetics kind of stuff to it, but it really, imparted the idea of, the immersion and the idea of role playing and making it seem more realistic. Anyway, from there,
What grade was that you said? Just to
this would have been
clarify what.
sophomore, sophomore high
Okay.
school.
And that's what you were teaching, was that
I was 9 through 12, but at that particular point,
9 through 12?
I
Okay.
had a sophomore prep class. Yeah.
Got it. Yep. Okay.
Um, Then from there, I mainly started going deeper and deeper into education technology. The next middle part of my career was doing that in a district position. I was a digital learning coordinator. And my most recent jump, this is year 20 for me in education. My most recent jump is with an educational cooperative. And that gave me an opportunity, a lovely opportunity I'm very thankful to serve in, um, to help be a part of helping 14 school districts. That's basically Louisville, Kentucky. That's Jefferson County Public Schools, but Louisville, Kentucky, and 13 other districts, which is about 150,000 students. I will tell you, I have not met each one of those 150,000 students. This is a collective, right? Uh, But my main job is just really as a digital learning consultant, that's my latest title, is just to help teachers with that. How do you use education technology in a way that's impactful? Don't know if you know about this, Mike, but there's a lot about that artificial intelligence. I mean, people are talking about it. I
Yeah,
tease you. I know you get a
yeah,
newsletter for that.
that's right.
Anyway, so I work a lot with that, but I always love the game-based learning. And so this has been an opportunity to work with, learn from, and celebrate friends in the field that are doing it. And this is as far as just Kentucky, like in our bluegrass state, there's some lovely people and examples of people that are doing the work, not just theoretical, not just wouldn't it be nice if, but actually doing from what I would call elements, right? Just parts and pieces of a tabletop role-playing game experience, but still some gamification going on, full whole hog to like full courses that are centered around the idea of like a Dungeons and Dragons mechanic or a tabletop role-playing game stuff. So good stuff is happening, and there you go.
Love that. I love that. So, it's interesting because we've had educators come in and your journey is similar, right? They sort of go, what if I try this really cool thing that I love and then sort of see how it engages. So I
Mhm.
assume the students responded positively, right? So in other words, you got a strong, that you started seeing a difference. Um, but I think one of the challenges is, and I've said this a few times out loud on some of these interviews where like, well, okay, we all get it that gamifying and then gamification's been overused. I've been in the gamification space for a while, and it's aggravating how much it's been abused, frankly.
Mhm.
But the idea is to make learning fun, which is again an very broad oversimplification, but we get it, right? Which is Dungeons and Dragons and all other tabletop role playing games, some less so than others, require you to learn the rule system, right? And if you learn the rule system, you learn how to play the game. You learn how to play the game. Why not have parts of other elements of learning to teach you about whatever the topic is, right? And of course, it's experiential learning. That's the point.
Mhm.
So we all get this. I think everybody does. I've never seen somebody say, you know what, it totally doesn't make any sense. The problem is it never becomes sort of pervasive. I think it's getting better and better, but it's pretty clear it is not there. Like it's just we haven't gotten over the hump where this is absolutely part of a curriculum recommended by one of the curriculum heads. Something that sort of students go, oh, I expected this. Maybe you'll hear it in college occasionally. Um, so what is it? What's the barriers? I mean, certainly you've been doing this for a bit now.
Mhm.
You've got I think, a pretty comprehensive view. What is stopping us? Because I think we all get it, right? It's to me,
Yeah,
it's sort of like if we really got it, we wouldn't have to talk about it as much as we do.
absolutely.
We have to clearly sort of evangelize this a little bit for some reason, and I think there's reasons, but I'll let you tell me what you see, and I'll certainly, if I'd like to compare notes if there's anything different from what I've heard. But you tell me, why haven't we? We all get it; it's awesome. So why is it a challenge to introduce into classrooms?
That's a great question, and to be honest, a lot of that is what propelled my interest in work in the Kentucky Educators role playing games. The website is a place to like collect the stories, and there was definitely a Field of Dreams element of if you build it, they will come.
Mhm.
I went on faith for a little bit that someone's doing this. Certainly, aren't they? Aren't they? Echo, echo. Um, and then when I did, and again, as you know, just a few miles down the highway this way or that way, I realized there's a thing here. Because you hear snippets, anecdotes, and stories. There are definitely great examples outside of Kentucky or worldwide for that matter. Anyway, but to answer your question, the first problem I think is there's some perceived barriers in perception being reality sometimes. One of the biggest things is the hook and the repel. The hook is that a lot of people that come to my professional developments where I talk about this, let's talk about the possibilities of tabletop role-playing games in education. They come with lovely, I love this because these are all the walks of life, all the different contents, all these different grade levels. And they say, well, I know that my students are talking about Dungeons and Dragons. If nothing else, because of Stranger Things or things like that, or Critical Role or different played YouTube streaming shows, Dimension 20 and so on. If you're
Mhm.
talking about Dungeons and Dragons, I think there's something here. I like to take something that they already like and engage with. How can I bring it in the classroom? But here's the first perceived barrier. When they if they take a moment, if they go to their local game shop or maybe just a bookstore, go on Amazon or whatever, and they go and they see one of these books and they go, this is one of the three books. It's 357 pages. It's daunting. That's probably a gentle way of putting it. So there's a feeling
Mhm.
of it's only Dungeons and Dragons, which of course we know. There's many different game systems, some with much more streamlined, simpler mechanics, frankly, that might even be better applicable in some instances.
Right.
But all they
Right.
know is Dungeons and Dragons, and it feels overwhelming. Well, I'm not going to read 757 pages of three books just to do some lesson, maybe only one time to see how it goes. So there's that. The second is that we are people that want to create joy and all those things. As you said, we all agree on that as a perimeter, but um, we need models, right? Like we need actual, not just theory or not just even frameworks, although I offer some frameworks and ideas of implementation. But at the end of the day, I need to know that some other high school social studies or some other middle school science teacher or some other fourth grade teacher has done it. And that's where I think the power of those numbers and stories, that narrative, that's a missing link too. If we don't hear those stories, then we can't find ourselves in those stories, right? Like, well, give me give me an example of a middle school person that's doing it and to what degree. And the last but not least thing I'd probably say is it doesn't have to be everything and all at once, to echo a movie from last year. Um, it's you can just dip your toe. You can be small little moves into what's a tabletop role playing game experience. Again, I use the word elements. Um, and then that allows you to maybe expand. Maybe you do an episodic, a kind of adventure, a multi-day lesson slash quest. And that may be the beginning and the end. Maybe you take and reflect on that and see, but you don't have to feel like your whole class has to become rolling of the dice and all that. I guess I'll throw in one more thing, which is I think sometimes people get the mechanics confused with the content. In other words, Dungeons and Dragons, which I'm a big fan of and personally love, and the mechanics really aren't bad if you break it down. But again, you look at the book sitting on the shelf, you get a little scared. Um, but just because you even use the Dungeons and Dragon mechanics, for example, to deliver content in a different way or to create a different experience, doesn't mean that your situation has to be like, well, I was going to do this thing about chemistry today, but I guess we have to include a dragon. Like you don't have to confuse the two. The fantasy theming is sometimes used and can be done, and it can be a great narrative. And within it, you kind of I call it folding in the cauliflower with the pizza, right? Like it's you're eating healthy, you don't even know it. You can do that, but you don't have to make everything be, and then he swung a sword, or it doesn't have to even be all combat, right? It could be problem solving in multiple levels and ways. So don't feel like it has to be about killing trolls and orcs, as it were, right? So anyway, that's a handful of things, Mike. I'd love to hear your notes and thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, so certainly on the spectrum of all that, I think the first thing is time.
Yeah,
A lot of folks are like, by the time I've got these kids, like, make a character. All right, well, that's a whole, can I justify make a character and that's all we do for 45 minutes to an hour because I don't have a lot of time and I have to get this other stuff done. So there's a little bit of lead up, right? So that's the challenge. The other one is outcomes, right? So depending on how you're measured and what we're a global organization. There's real expected, like you can't introduce a thing to the curriculum because you like it. You have to have demonstrated outcomes, and that's a nascent field. We're getting more to your point, like we're getting there, but it is not necessarily. Hey, not everybody has that freedom that they can do that, depending on the curriculum where they live and work. So that's a thing. And I absolutely think, and it's a really good point. I don't think I've heard this as much because I think D&D is such a monstrous, literally and metaphorically, brand that it consumes the others, right? There's so many other really great role-playing games that don't have to be combat, right? Which D&D has a bias, and fantasy, which D&D has that bias. So, um, you know, but that's sort of the level. And in some ways, that's the hook, as you said, right? So, because they saw Stranger Things, they watch Critical Role. Well, then they go, well, okay, that's the thing. That's what I want to do, right? That's how you
right.
get kids in. But that's definitely been a lot of it that I've heard, which was really the time. Look, it's not easy to do these games with large groups. Like, if you're talking 20 kids, right? I've done the game design merit badge twice for my Boy Scout troop, and it's chaotic with 23, 30 kids. And it's essentially, and then what the second time I learned a lot. The second time I had DMs sort of run it, but I'm essentially running a tournament style game in the span of an hour and a half. And that is hard to pull off. And that was one,
Absolutely.
like you get one session. So lots of factors that I think there's so much to learn. And as you mentioned, some of it can be gamifying elements. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. But
Well,
look, the intimidating factor is right. Sorry, go
well,
ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, I'll quickly hit three of the things you were saying, I think, which are great, great points. The first is just a simple lift, and this is from our friends that do the D&D clubs who recognize that I might see you once, I might not see you again, or I might not see you for like
Yeah,
the classic library experience where it's an open season, people walk in, sit down. Okay,
right.
pre-gen characters. Let's just get on with it. Like that, there's a whole art and an act of what generation of characters, and if that fits your needs and objectives, that's great. But if the doing is more important, then here's your five randomly assigned. They whatever the system is, but they're already made. Let's just move on. Now, if your goal, and that segues into the second thing, I think your excellent point about like with anything, what is your goal? Let's work our way backwards from that. And my friend, that is, again, I talk education technology a lot as well. That's a super duper important thing. People take the tool that they get really excited about, AI, whatever. I got to use this. And we say, well, let's step back. What is your objective? Now, that tool may or may not be the best to meet your objective. So start with your objective. But to your point, I might not need to make a character unless maybe I'm a high school English teacher or a middle school English teacher, and I'm making a character and the backstory is the point, right? Like I'm creating narrative. Oh, well, then making a character might be the end, really. Play would hopefully happen later because wouldn't that be fun? But so again, pre-gen characters for saving time. Make sure you know your goals. And the last thing I would say, and that was a huge question I had looking into this. If you look at a typical D&D experience, 5 to 7 players is the average. How do you do that when a typical class is 30? And I found, I've posited some ideas, but I've certainly actually seen in person and in action different ways that people have taken that facilitation question and done different things. And sometimes it can be as simple as they found some tricks to kind of auto DM it or auto GM it. In other words, there's a slide deck of a certain sequence of adventures, sequence of events, and each small group of students, that's what's becoming kind of the DM experience for them. So that's how you just make it work, because otherwise 30 people all yelling at you would be crazy. So there are ways. It's a very fair question though, because if you go by the traditional route, it's just do the sheer numbers and it's hard. And there's other things like developing student DMs, not something you could do on day 1 or 2, but that's a way. So there's methods. But again, what are your goals ultimately, and what are your stepping stones to that? You don't have to figure it all out by tomorrow or next Tuesday. Just, finding a path and finding models of people that have done it this way, that way, with this age group, with that age group, helping you. I think.
And you made a really good point too, which is funny because I try to step out. Now, I've been utterly immersed in D&D. It's like a way of life for me at this point, and role playing in general, not just D&D. And as the dragons, we're known as the Dragon House, among other things. But what's pretty funny is I always say you have to understand if people's gaming experience was Monopoly, um, here's 900 pages of rules, and we're going to be playing for 3 to 5 years. Do you want to play
Right.
with me? And people are like, what? That
Right.
is a
Yeah.
lot, and I don't think I'm ready to, And so again, and that's a home campaign. That's a whole different animal. It's not this short sort of potentially bounded shorter engagement. But I think you've also got the other side of it where people are like, well, if I'm, the way I played, we played for like on and off for 4 years in high school or college.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that in the classroom? So yeah, I mean, there's that. There's also that too, which is um, if you know enough, just enough to sort of get the perspective, it's not a casual thing. It's a commitment.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I get it, but I do try to put it in that context of if you're used to just playing a board game that lasts a few hours, and I've certainly met people who think D&D is a board game, partially because there are D&D board games, or because they see miniatures and dice.
Right,
Um,
right.
it's a long board game.
Right. Well, and to riff off that, it's all the things. If I'm a teacher in a classroom, I think there was that time to teach personal finance, I'd use Monopoly, right? And then where did it all go south? Well, first off, after about, I don't know, two periods of instruction, pieces start missing. It's like, well, that's the end of that game.
Yeah.
The second thing is that a lot of those are competitive. So you amp up this energy in the class, and then suddenly it's like people are screaming at each other, and you landed on boardwalk, and you owe me $700, and it just becomes it deteriorates, if you will.
Right.
Um, so Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role-playing games in general, so many of them, almost all of them, is that collaborative aspect. Just that is a mind shift, which is what forced one of the reasons I think they're lovely and I think they're good in the classroom. But that's different. So again, it's schema, as we call it in education, right?
Hmm.
It's like, what is your schema? If your schema is Monopoly, and you remember that time that you were playing with your uncle and everyone yelled and you cried and hid under the table, then that's not a positive experience. All of those things play against, well, why would I bring something like a Dungeons and Dragons? And last but not least, though, there's really in librarians, as a classic example, there's other people and facilitators that do this, of course, but those librarians that are like, come one, come all, I mean, they have really mastered the idea of this could be just a one shot, and it's okay if it is. And that goes back to if it's in education, it's just what is your goal? And maybe it takes you a couple of days, or but that could be the beginning and end. You don't have to feel like if I do it, it has to be a campaign for 9 months of the school year. It could be for a unit, for a month. It could be small, big. And yes, there are examples where people have done it for the full course. However, it's entry points, right? Where do you want to step into the flow of a river? It's not one way or the other, not absolute.
And I'll say the other sort of parallel is escape rooms. Some of the best escape rooms we played were by historians and librarians
Yeah,
who run them,
yeah.
and they run them in our local library, and we absolutely adore them. And we've solved them; they're doable. You learn a lot.
Mhm.
Really, really well done. Better than some of the pro ones, like the professional. They just sort of bring you through these, very advanced rooms. So it's really fascinating to me to see that because to that point, it's bounded. It's the right mindset of, strangers coming together to sort of work together as a team to navigate some challenges, which I love. So look, I think in some ways we've hit on some of this, which is obviously we see the value, and you certainly see the value. But let's talk a little bit about that thing behind you, KeyEd. So I'm saying, is it? How do you say that? KY Ed,
Wait,
Kentucky Ed,
KyEdRPG. Yes, Kentucky Educators for
Ed
Role-Playing Games. It's KyEdRPG.com, and that's the also the social media handle across the various platforms. So yeah,
But talk
KyEdRPG.
more. Talk more about that. Obviously, we can see the arc, right? We're seeing where this is going, but now you're taking it broader, right? In some ways. So what's the sort of the genesis of all this, and how did it expand? And
Yeah, it was just over a couple of years ago. There was maybe a little bit of a put up and shut up moment with me. It was like, well, is there value in this or not? And taking the chance to develop a place that because I was looking for websites, and there definitely are. I don't want to knock, denigrate, or pretend that I'm the first to ever come up with a website that had educational resources. Of course not. Um, but I did find a struggle in finding a lot of what would help a K through 12 instructor.
hmm,
Um, I found intersectional resources. In other words, there are and there is good resources about therapeutic uses. I think that has a place to play and a place for validity, for example, in what we're talking about, but that's here. I also saw several higher ed examples, whole books written about some examples of that, in fact. Again, things to learn from, but it's a different age group, a different cohort, different experience than what K through 12 is going to be. Um, so that started the idea of, trying to find a place. And really that's the place became the website, which became the name, which became, I say group in a very loose way. It's not like it's a club. There are no dues, there are no officers. As you were going over the things earlier, like there's no voting and boards and things like that.
yeah,
It's more of just like if you feel like this is something you can believe in and share and contribute to, for that matter, join the banner. So it's just more of a that kind of thing when I say it's a group. Um, that all said, it was a place to put all those things and then just kind of have a name to rally around. it was important for me to find the local examples. So that's why the KY part was important to me. You know, I do have a few examples, and I love to hear examples of people in other places, other states, other countries, even. But I think there was a locality that made it intriguing. In other words, um, anywhere in the Midwest, in the flyover states, as they would say, right? People might say, well, you know, that sounds like a really highfalutin California idea, or is that something that, you know, a very innovative New York school would do? But what about Kansas or South Dakota or Kentucky, you know? And I think that the power for me is that these are people that you might even be able to just travel down to district over and visit their classroom. And the power of that to see things that are innovative and different, things like, you know, tabletop role-playing game parts and elements and playing. I think that was a powerful incentive for me to make it local, you know, to make it global, so to speak. Anyway, um, so yeah, so that began a couple of years ago, and you know, it's like the good thing is that word of mouth and opportunities. And this friend that does it gets someone else excited. They're like, "Come and talk to me about that." And what ideas do you have? Anyway, so it's been a great journey about that on several levels, and I've been fortunate to do it in some professional developments and to travel to a couple of different places to do some sessions even outside of Kentucky. So that's also great just to you know share the story.
It's fantastic. So, I mean, and I think that's one of the things that's so often missing is the ground game, right? We really have to have sort of that immediate connection to actual use cases. As you said, frankly, there's a lot of headwinds for good reason where people say, well, okay, you're going to teach somebody else's children using game tools. You want to make sure you're in good company and you can justify and explain to your superiors
Yes.
why that works. So examples are fantastic. And I think certainly regionally, that's a easier, compelling argument to make than trying to say nationally, like you said, you know, look at this book or whatever. It's like, okay, that's nice, but that's not in the classroom here.
Yeah.
What do you have? So, I mean, this is fantastic. Obviously, it's very complimentary to the CAR-PGA, which is, of course, why we're talking and why you are a member. But so, how's it going? Like, so, what was sort of the reception and growth, and how is that? How long has this been going for? I feel like it's probably on there,
A
but
little over 2 years. I started in August. I guess the site went live in mid-August, early August of 2022. Um, One of the things that I try to do through blog entries, I have a blog called EdTech Elixirs that by the name, you can tell that it talks a lot about education technology, but I've definitely expanded that to talk about game-based learning. It has the word elixirs in it. So of course there's a fantasy
yeah, of
potion
course,
element.
yeah.
I
Come
mean,
on.
yeah, yeah. I built that in from the beginning. I just didn't know it. One of the things that's on the website and also several times have been done on the blog is just highlighting those stories. So you can really not only here's what this person's doing, but in many cases, you have some resources in a Google folder or whatnot of like, here's the slide deck they used, here's the character sheet or the template in a Google slide or whatever it might be. So there's tangibles there. It's not just a little quick one paragraph anecdote and do with it what you will. But in many cases, these educators have been kind enough to really share some the concrete, the materials that would help others hopefully take up that and do their version of this lesson or that lesson. Um, so I've been thankful about that, and again, a lot of those friends. I mean, I can share a story or two. Do you want me to share a couple of examples of
Please
teachers?
do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, one we'll go kind of big and as an example. There is a teacher named John Brewer, and he was probably the first person that realized if he's doing what he's doing, and I went and saw it with my own eyes, watched the students, and sat in a classroom. If we can do it this big, then all the stepping stones up to it are possible. He had a creative writing class in his high school. He's a high school English teacher. He shaped it around Dungeons and Dragons. They do actually start with developing a character because they develop a backstory. And here's the greatest moment, an important moment to pause and say that lesson by lesson, assessment by assessment, he can go and say these are standards, actual state standards that we are attributing these things to. This isn't just for funsies. And the assessments might be a little different or unique, but he can collect that data. And if it's an assistant principal or a super, whoever wants to walk in and say, are the kids really learning he has the data. He calls it, he has the receipts. Bring receipts, show that there's value in it. If there's a parent that's questioned or concerned, are y'all just rolling dice all day long? I'm happy to address that, and here's examples of how your student, your particular child is learning. So full course, this creative writing class, all about Dungeons and Dragons, all these different elements. They do actually play Dungeons and Dragons. One of the things he's did that was fascinating and great is that he brought in something called the Cohen's monster theory. It's this collegiate, really, level of rigor of thinking about monsters through culture and symbolism. What does a werewolf or a zombie really mean, and what does it symbolize? Well, he took that Cohen's monster theory, and that's Cohen, by the way, and he brought that into the classroom. And so that was part of their process is like, okay, a zombie. What are examples of zombie? What could a zombie symbolize? They do some analysis of it. They watch some videos. There's some text to read. And it's really high rigorous. Like it's like cauliflower in the pizza thing I was talking about, right? Like they're talking about zombies, but they're talking really about a high level literary theory that college students would probably struggle through on its dry face, right? Instead, these students are engaged in a way that's very interactive and fun. And by the way, at some point, they might actually, roll some dice and fight a zombie. And how does that go? Um, so um, the other thing that was great when I visited his class is I was able to talk to some students. And 201, they hadn't played Dungeons and Dragons before this class. But also 201, they were like, whether I ever play Dungeons and Dragons again, who knows? But I really appreciated, I don't, I watch a movie now and I don't think, I think when I watch a movie, I think completely differently about when a monster comes on screen. I realize a monster sometimes just isn't a monster. And I
Right.
mean, just, pitter patter goes my heart. It was just all the good things you would hope to see in engagement and joy, yes, but also rigor and core content standards and all that stuff. So John Brewer from Louisville, Jefferson County Public Schools, was kind of one example. Another example is Chad Collins from Spencer County Middle School. He took a class that was a class for an academy team that was kind of an elective, but then he kind of did it and blew it up, and the doors were open and other students could join it as well. But he recognized, these are people we need to learn deeper, we need to learn differently. So he and an assembly of teachers who all decided they were all in, he reshaped and designed the class as the academy. And it's all the trimming and trappings of like a fantasy world. The kids are whisked into this magical school, and the pathway they pick, what we'd call a class in D&D, becomes the subject matter that for a quarter they super duper really immerse themselves in. They learn about, they do some projects with, they level up because as they complete these quests, they get points. Points are really their grade, but it's the experience points. Looking at it, they earn through their learning their grades and level up as opposed to they got points. And I know it's a fun, like you might say that's just semantic, but I think it shows the idea and the possibilities of what you can do by taking that concept and putting it in a classroom. This is a middle school classroom. Um, and I mean, it's just he's going into middle of year two, I guess, right now. And it's just amazing to see the leaps and bounds, and it's all the things. He's used some artificial intelligence to do some questing, to create images. He's got a lot of, little game side quest kind of stuff as review games, but also for the first time this year, he's actually starting to do some actual tabletop role-playing game. Because I said to him, the only thing this is missing is actual kids role playing with dice. And so he's like, you're right. And so he's finally starting to do a little bit of that. So I mean, again, be still my heart, right? Like it's all the things that I wish little Adam Watson at 10 years old had an opportunity to do. So
I love
um,
it.
and the last thing I'll just give as far as an elementary example is Morgan Seeley from Shelby County is a fourth grade teacher, a fan of Dungeons and Dragons. She played a little bit, so she was certainly familiar with the game. We talked some. And she did a thing where the students, again, a simplified version, like she recognized that there's a lot going on in Dungeons and Dragons. So what's the essential elements she can draw down and make simple for a fourth grade student? And so she helped create that system, and they created characters. And then those characters were going to go on some adventures academically throughout the year. So bottom line again is, you see all those different content levels and different types and things, and there's a lot of opportunity there, and a lot of different grade levels, and a lot of different teachers doing some awesome things.
It's fantastic. And of course, that's currency, right? To really get this adopted and achieved is really making sure the kids are excited. I mean, we know the teachers are excited. Obviously, they're putting a lot of effort into this. The educators are engaging, but we you got to hear from the kids too, right? And seeing all that, and as you said, talking to them, I think is huge. So, um, I want to make sure we have time for questions. What's next for you?
Well, this is probably a good opportunity for me to kind of plug three big things that are happening
Please do.
in just the next month or so. Um, well, and I'm going to go here, so I can just click on this events, and I can make some things happen behind me. Look at this magic! It's a
Nice.
magic
That's
screen.
right. I like
It's my
that.
portal. The first thing in February 18th is we have an opportunity. I've partnered with Callie Colley, who's with the Kentucky Department of Education. She is a regional innovative specialist and consultant, and also a fan of tabletop role-playing games. Did a little bit of that in her own classroom before she came out to join KDE. She and I are joining forces, and we're having Dungeons and Desks. It's a one of hopefully some several PDs, but this is the kickoff idea of it. It's in Western Kentucky. It's completely free. It's for educators, and it's a full day of PE for them to learn about different ways and ideas of tabletop role-playing games and education. We're going to have some local Western Kentucky community partners. And here's a fun plug. Who did I have who I didn't know existed until you interviewed him? A friend from Paducah, Kentucky, from Dice Alliance, Corey Toon.
I was just about to ask if you had Corey because
And
you
he is
guys
one
are
of
in the zone, right? Yeah, for sure.
absolutely did. And here it is, my own state. I had no idea about Dice Alliance until I watched your all's
I was
interview
gonna have to
video.
mention at the end, and I was like, good. I'm glad that that connection happened.
It
Wonderful.
did.
Yes.
It was lovely. Wouldn't have happened without this show and this organization. So that's on February 18th. The thing to keep in mind is within like a 2 hour radius of Western Kentucky, you have Southern Illinois, you have Northwest Tennessee, that includes Nashville. You got a little Missouri, you got a little of Southwest Indiana. So if you're wanting to do a little bit of a drive, it doesn't have to feel like if you're not in Kentucky, you're missing out. And it doesn't matter if you're outside of Kentucky. It's still free, free, free. Come down to us. All of these things, by the way, are on the KyEdRPG.com website. Go to events and you'll see things, registration and links and in places. So that's one. The next thing, if you can do this backwards, maybe. There's a local
Yeah.
first time Louisville convention of gaming. Now, this is an actual true gaming. The first thing is like Educator PD, but this Love Thy Gamer is being held on March 1st. A little bit of a registration fee. I'm doing a session about tabletop role-playing games and education there. One of the people that's behind this is Brandon Ayton, who is with Wet Ink Games, which is a local game publisher that's from Kentucky. So more fun
That's great.
there. And here's the big one. The one
Oh,
that I'm really excited
yeah.
about is the tabletop role-playing game telethon. Again, I will not claim to be unique or the first to ever do this, but Nerd Louisville, a group from Louisville, who has been in the space for a while, for years actually, helping youth, raising money. They're a 501(c)(3). They came to KyEd RPG and said, "Can we do something?" And I said, "Well, let me bring in the part from my organization that I work with is called OVEF, Ohio Valley Educational Fund. That is the charitable arm of my employer. Let's get your charity with this charity, OVEF. Let's do a thing." So I pitched the idea of let's have educators come together and they're going to um, play the world's greatest fantasy game. You can probably guess which one. They are going to do this live. So there's an opportunity if you're local, you can come and watch the play happen, but it's also going to be live streamed. So you can watch it from afar. And of course, the idea of this is to raise funds for our North Central Kentucky youth that we support. I talked about the region of Louisville and the surrounding districts of 150,000 students. It's a great opportunity to raise money in a different and fun way. So we're really excited about that. We have some sponsorship, including Dice Alliance. And TTRPGtelethon.com is the website to get all the info and to find out more about the educators playing, the sponsors who are behind it, and so much more. So TTRPGtelethon.com. But again, if you go to the KyEdRPG website, you can get links to that. And that's the
Normally,
plugging.
Adam, the answer to my what's next for you is like, I may be at a con. Adam's
Well,
like, I got telethons. I got like a love your thy gamer. We're gonna I love it. That clearly you have been busy. This is absolutely amazing. So I won't even ask how we support you because the obvious answer is we're going to be sharing this, attending this, and making sure everybody knows about it.
listen, if you can't
That's
be there,
fantastic.
to tell someone else about it, right? Or
Yeah.
put it out there on the web. So I appreciate that. And
Yes.
I should say it's really important to say all of these things, the KYN RPG, the website, the sources, none of it would be possible if it wasn't for all the people in the various ways. Anything from the educator that was kind enough to say, I have an idea or I have a thing I'd love to share, come on down, celebrating their stories, to the person who just said, hey, here's an article that I think would help, or here's a tool that I think kind of fits in the wheelhouse of what teachers could possibly use to do tabletop role-playing games in education. Every little piece and part, telethon without the players, the teacher, educator, people that are going to be a part of this. It really takes an entire village or a castle or a whole world to make
An
these things
adventuring
happen.
party at least. At
An
least an
adventuring
adventuring
party at
party.
least. Never
Yes.
split the adventuring party. You know
That's
that. You
right.
know that, right? So
That's
we're
right.
powerful together.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're already a CAR-PGA member, so you're part of the family. We will absolutely support you on this. I love this.
Thank
And
you.
by the way, you're plenty to work with too. So we can start talking about this right now. And we have plenty to share. And I know you are certainly not quiet like me. So we will hear more about all of these. I love that poster too. That's a nice poster.
Well, it's Canva. Well, I'm not going to try to pretend
Yeah,
that I
but you
was
did a good
like,
job in Canva. That's great. It's really pop.
well,
So
all right. Well, thank you.
that's how social media works. You have to have a piece. So, Faith is on. So we do have someone in the audience. Faith, did you have any questions for Adam? It's fine if you don't, but I figured I'd open it up.
Yeah, I do actually.
There we go. Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi.
Hey, awesome. So, one of the things that I found chatting to people that I know in the UK who've been working with education and role play games is there's, quite a lot of, I guess, misconceptions. What's the biggest thing that you bump into that people have just got the wrong idea before you talk to them?
Um, I think that sometimes, first off, it's so funny, and this is the organization to talk about that in context with. The idea of like the satanic panic has faded tremendously from the front of the scene. I think that it's just so mass media, things like Dungeons and Dragons, the Stranger Things, popularizing it. Um, Most of that's faded to the woodwork. But it's fair to say, even if it's not quite from that standpoint, that, is this all blood and guts? And, I'm not sure I want my kids to play Dungeons and Dragons in school. And a brilliant answer to this comes from Justin Gadd, another one of my beautiful friends that have done some awesome things in the classroom. He's a middle school social studies teacher. He in all the time he's done this for a couple of years, he's done different pieces and episodic one shots, that sort of thing. He's only ever had one parent that complained. And this is the brilliant use of the phrase that I think should be encouraged for others. The parent said, I'm not crazy. I'm not a little worried about him playing Dungeons and Dragons in class. And he said, well, he's not playing Dungeons and Dragons. He's playing a D&D like game to learn blah, blah, blah. And then once he broke down, like, and then we're talking about it's the Roman soldiers and they're coming into Britain and, the different setbacks they had. And at the end of it, the parent was like, where do I sign up? Right. Like I want to play. So I think it's how you contextualize and you communicate. I cannot stress this enough, especially if it's something that you're really planning to do a lot of, is communicate to parents, but also be prepared to show those parents and celebrate the stories of how your students are growing because of this. And I have the academic, again, to use John Brewer's statement, have the receipts. I think that's important.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent question, Faith. Any other questions, Faith, on your side?
I mean, I think the only other one I can really think of around the education side of things is do you find that it kind of goes from, you bringing this to students to them then just sort of like going, I've got these ideas myself and sparking their creativity? Because I've seen other research that's been done. I can't remember who it was. I was reading some of the CAR-PGA you know, research from previously that's saying, hey, when students are actually exposed to role play games and it fires their creativity, it really kind of becomes. H's is not the word I'm looking for, but it kind of really kind of sparks that creativity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that I use the phrase co-created story, which is like if I have 2.7 seconds to explain a tabletop role-playing game, that's what I go. Co-created story. We're done. Um, Co-created story also opens the door to a different mechanic in education, which I think in a lot of different ways, even tabletop role-playing games aside, is a shift that's happening, which is, we're all learners. And if students are ever going to become agentic, fully realized humans that are going to go out in the world and do the good things, you can't wait until like 10 seconds before they were going to walk across the stage and get a rolled up piece of paper to say, now you're on your own. Congratulations, right? I think tabletop role-playing games and a co-created story increases that opportunity to spark those interests, to get them excited, to create a sense of it's our story, not my story. What you said was so lovely. It also sparked a thing so good that I have it. It's the only time in this I promise I'm going to read to you for 15 seconds. Foundry 10 did a white paper in January of 2023 that's phenomenal about just the power of, in their case, it was more therapeutic of tabletop role-playing games. But this paragraph is like if you don't believe that you should do an education after you hear this, you should. So in their findings at the very end, they said, the imaginative world of tabletop role-playing games creates a degree of separation from the real world, allowing youth to learn and grow in a low-stakes environment. As education moves toward more creative forms of learning, focusing on projects, play, collaboration, and creativity, there is an opportunity for TTRPGs to be used more broadly as a way to learn about SEL skills like regulation, collaboration, planning, perspective taking, and pretend play, as well as group process skills like problem solving, conflict resolution, delegation, strategy, and more. Listen, that's a long list, but if we could only do half that and do it well, then we're a lot better off for the generation coming through because they need that. We need that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for your question too, Faith. I appreciate you asking
Yes,
those
thank you.
questions. So,
That's a
Adam,
good
look,
thanks.
yes, thank you, Faith. Adam, this is amazing. There's like eight things that we could talk about, and we don't have the time. So, what we will do is we're just going to table some of those because we're going to follow you. You have three events, so sometimes I have to ask like how we're going to keep. There's no question. So the first one is Dungeons and Desks. We will be talking about that. We will include this in the newsletter as well. We're going to include the video in the newsletter as well,
Perfect.
as usual. And then, of course, as we mentioned, we're also going to be doing our board voting as well. So we've got a lot going on, and plus we have all these new members. So this is an embarrassment of riches. And by the way, just for the record, you have like an amazing list of resources with like a bunch of people we should be inviting for our future panels. So thank you as we go through
Yes.
your list and
Yes.
look up
Find
everybody
future
in
guests. I
there.
was going to say there's at
Yes,
least a half a dozen in there, I'm
exactly.
sure. Yeah.
More than that. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Thank you so much for doing really the right work at the right place. Because, as we know, for every educator who's sort of thinking about this in the back of their head or secretly a geek and isn't sure how to, show it, there's folks like yourselves who are really spraying the love. I think the Love Thy Gamer is such a wonderful, positive way to sort of emphasize that, right? Which is to show it's not just about saying, I think this is cool and you should do it. It's saying, I want you to think it's cool too, right?
Yeah.
And to have kids, especially post-COVID kids,
Yes.
who I've been told have lost a lot of executive function in a lot of ways, where they don't raise hands anymore, they don't work together in groups. If you, like you said, if you get a percentage of them to work together as a team, man, boy, are we back on track. And certainly as somebody who's in business all day, um, every day I use those skills every day.
Yeah.
So,
They're lifelong
and
durable
ironically,
skills. Yeah.
yeah, and ironically now I use like the online skills because I play online and that's my whole business and job is online. So,
Right.
fantastic work. We will absolutely follow you. Thank you so much, Adam. I'm glad you're a member. So I don't have to, it's not a hard sell, and it's pretty obvious why we're together here.
Yeah.
The roles are complementary. I'm so glad that we were able to get Corey involved because I was like, wait a minute. I can do geographical networking. But
I,
that's
I
the
but I,
magic of this.
by the end of that video, I was finding the website, and emailing him, and here we are. So yeah,
Excellent. I
and
love
that's
it.
what it should be. We
That
should all
is
be coming together. Yeah.
exactly right. Exactly right. So more to come. We will absolutely invite you back. Hope you can keep us apprised. We are on
Yeah.
Blue Sky. That's my new, you constantly hear me talk about Blue Sky, and I really do believe that it is a new world in the Blue Sky space. My Blue Skylings, who I adore, I think this is going to be huge. So thank you for taking the time. Don't go anywhere
Mhm.
after we hang up here or stop recording. But fantastic. Thank you, Adam, for your time. We will definitely have more to report on your efforts and can't wait to hear more about these three events.
And I'll just add, thank you. And I'll just add, yes, if you go to the KyEdRPG website, there's a link. You can sign up for updates. Please do so. You'll get a little quarterly newsletter plus other famous things. And KyEdRPG, whatever social media is your flavor, you'll probably find me on there, I hope. So I hope to join up with you all. And again, thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight.
We will share all those links as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.